Just 2 or 3 miles east of Plymouth in Devon, the Yealm River is a beautiful spot for a visit if ever you're touring in the southwest. The river entrance faces west. There's a rocky ledge which is awash except at low tide, which makes entrance into this river require some care. And there's a sandbar which extends from the northern shore almost all the way across the river. There's a porthand mark at the southeastern corner of the sandbar, so upriver from it, and a further porthand mark a little further upstream again. There's an anchorage beyond these by Cellar Beach, which is good in fine weather but not great in a southwesterly blow. There is no anchoring allowed anywhere east or north of Misery Point, so nowhere upriver from this dotted line. Misery Point is that little promontory just to the north of Cellar Beach. The headland to the south side of the river is known as Mouthstone Point. Below it is the rocky outcrop known as Mouthstone Ledge, and to help us avoid this, we have 2 marks on the shore just north of Cellar Beach. These provide a transit which we can use to avoid Mouthstone Ledge. However, if you follow this transit for too long, it will take you straight onto the sandbar. It's worth noting that on charts, the part of the transit that should not be followed is marked with a black dashed line instead of a magenta solid line. The second transit is provided by 2 marks on the northern shore once we've gone past the sandbar. This transit conveniently lines up with the second of the porthand marks, so all you need to do is arrive at that second mark and then turn hard towards the 2 transit marks and you'll be on the transit. Coming in from the west, pick up the transit early before you arrive at the headland, but then once alongside Mouthstone Point, in other words once you've got rocky outcrops to your right rather than the sea, turn to the first of the porthand marks, keep it close to port, then keep the second porthand mark close to port, then turn hard to port to point at the marks on the northern shore and follow that transit until you're in the middle of the river in the right hand bend just below the marks. It's then straightforward to visually navigate down the centre of the river, noting the porthand mark which is found at the spit on the left hand bend and the starboard hand mark which is by the harbour master's office and the dinghy dock on the entrance to the creek. There's a visitor's pontoon just before that between those 2 marks and a further one further upriver in shallower water but with better shelter. On this pontoon you'll have 1.5 to 2 metres at chart datum. There's plenty of water on the other pontoon. Both of them have significant cross currents at times, so take care when docking. Here we are just to the north of Mouthstone Ledge. We're looking at the first pair of marks. As you can see, they're really clear by day. The porthand marks are lit, but they're beyond the sandbar, so we do need to take care if coming in at night. We only need to follow this transit in until we've established that we're east of the headland, and then we can start aiming at the first of those porthand marks. If we now look to starboard, we can see we're quite close to Mouthstone Ledge, which sticks out quite a few metres beyond the visible shoreline. Now it's time to turn towards it slightly in order to point at the first of the porthand marks. As long as you're on that transit and you're east of Mouthstone Head, then you're quite safe to turn to that porthand mark and keep it close to port. The sandbar is in front of that porthand mark and to the left of it, so keeping it close to port will keep me clear of the sandbar. I'm cheating because I've got forward scan turned on my boat, so I've got forward looking scanning, so I was able to make absolutely certain that we were safe whilst running this close to the mark. We're going to go past that mark, keeping it close to port, straight on to keep the second mark close to port, and then turn harder port to point at the 2 marks which are now visible on the northern shore of the river. These 2 will be in line, giving us a perfect transit once we're at that second porthand mark. Straight ahead you can see a couple of yachts in that anchorage at Cellar Beach. Apparently it's a lovely anchorage with a bit more water than shown on the charts quite a lot of the time, but not great in a strong southwesterly blow. As we now come up on the second port hand mark, I'm keeping it close to port again, and as you can see, those transits on the northern shore are now nicely lined up, so I'll round that mark with a hard turn to port to point straight at the marks. It's very straightforward therefore to follow this transit, which will keep us clear of those rocks on the right hand side at what's known as Misery Point, which is the headland you can see to the right of the river at the moment. Once we get up to this turn in the middle of the river, it's just a matter of following it visually round the bends, keeping ourselves in the centre of the channel. All that remains is to visually follow the centre of the river, pick your way between the mooring buoys, and keep an eye out for that port hand mark and then the starboard hand mark just in front of the dinghy dock. Also remember, a bit of cross current is quite common on those two visitors' pontoons. A cracking place to visit, and we can't wait to go back. I hope you found that useful or enjoyable. Please don't forget, hit subscribe, like and that bell icon to help us grow the channel.